Christina and I have spent many hours drinking at inappropriate times.
It says we're on live now.
Okay, it says we're live. Let's see if I refresh the page.
It says it's setting up the space.
Past live videos.
Okay.
Start live video, is that what I should say?
No, I don't
Okay,
think
so now I see us, but I don't know how to start the watch party, so I'm not.
Can you see us on Facebook?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh,
look at that. Hey.
I'm in it?
There you go, Christina. We're on, but I don't know how to start the watch party.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if I
No, Amanda, I think you're just live.
We're on.
Amanda, you're just live.
No, we're live. You're live.
Watching.
I am. We are.
We're live.
Hello, 4 people.
Okay, I see you now.
And if you press share, you can start a watch party. So it's like
Oh, that's what it is.
Share.
Watch party.
I can't see if we're live.
We're live.
Oh.
Well, we're live on your page. I don't know.
Oh, if we do share and then share now.
Sorry, Luna, did you said we're live on what page? The Tango Roundtable page?
What I'm seeing is you.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm seeing all of us as you. Like we're all on your screen, but it says Christina McFadden is live now.
Okay, Scott says we're live. I have no idea where we're live. Sorry about this, everyone.
No, we are live.
Really
We are live.
Glitchy. Because I don't know where the feed is for this. So if you can see us, great.
Hello.
We are live.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna start this off because I don't want to kind of waste time. And then when I give you guys the sort of floor to speak around your introductions, I'll kind of go back and forth and make sure that everyone's tagged and you'll be able to everyone be able to see it. I just want to make sure about that. I'm getting like 100 Facebook messages, so I gotta look at that. All right, here we go. Composed. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining. And we were just speaking right before this around nervousness, and I want to speak to my sense of nervousness because I want to do right by you. I want to speak appropriately, and I want to listen and give the floor to you as best as I can. So I'm feeling a sense of nervousness and around, but I also feel a deep sense of excitement because of how many people have RSVP'd and written to me personally, and the growing momentum around this topic because it's so timely. I'm feeling the excitement around having this conversation with the 5 of you. And if yesterday's kind of pre-call was any indication, that it's just like we're going to have an amazing conversation. So if you're just joining us, thank you so much. We're going to be talking about racism and inclusivity inside of Tango. We want to speak specifically about racism, but we also want to point to inclusivity on a larger scale because it's not just around racism. And we'll be speaking to that and inclusivity in other areas as well, but we probably won't be able to encapsulate all of it. We just want to give that caveat. And the second caveat we want to give is that all of these women were very particular around, this is my personal story, and I recognize that this may not be everyone's personal story. They may have different experiences inside of Tango. And nevertheless, hearing the collective of these individuals telling their individual stories, you start to see the pattern at large of what's happening around racism. And I want to go have everyone introduce themselves, and I'll call on each one of you and have them talk about their background, and also what you would like to have, what you would like to convey to people, or what they would like to know by the end of this. So I'm going to start with Nicole. Please just introduce yourself, and I'm going to quickly just sort of pivot for a moment. So I'm listening, but I'm changing subjects. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nicole Hill. I've been dancing tango since the early 2000s, and I dance a number of other Latin social dances as well. A little bit about myself. I have a PhD in cognitive psychology, where I study things like attention and even skilled behavior, which includes things like dance. And the reason I mention that is I think a lot about bias as a psychologist and how that impacts human behavior. What I hope you take away is openness to listen to experiences that might be very different than ours, and then action, because I've had people lend a sympathetic ear, but then it goes nowhere. So really think about what we all can do to make an inclusive community.
Thank you, Nicole. Anthea, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Anthea. I'm from the UK. I've been dancing for 13 years, lived in Buenos Aires for 4 years. I work in the arts and in marketing. And I just want people to take from this talk that tango isn't always a meritocracy. So when I speak of my experiences, or sometimes when teachers or instructors speak about tango and about people's experiences on the dance floor, they usually will give you advice to try and make you feel better by saying, if you work on your dance, you will get the dances you want. And it just kind of makes me cringe every time. And I just want people to understand that tango isn't always a meritocracy, and just to listen to people's experiences and don't try to give advice that is maybe just a platitude of, if you smile more, or do you look at anybody, or, you know, trying to explain to me how to use cabeceo. So just try to remain open-minded and let our experiences and feelings be valid and speak of in and of themselves. That's it, really.
Thank you. Anthea. Jamila, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Jamila Williams. I have been dancing tango, I don't know, I guess 9 or 10 years. I can't keep up. Now I started in Seattle, which has a really great community. And I've been living in Buenos Aires for the past 6, 7 years. How many? Yes, please help me. 8 years. 8 years.
August 2012.
Yes, thank you. So time flies, I guess, when you're dancing tango, or when you're not, as we are not right now. But what I hope that everybody gets out of this is a little more awareness, you know, just awareness of others in your space, because I think tango can be such a personal practice, and so you can be really thinking about your own experience a lot. And I think it's important to think about other people's experience and how they're experiencing tango, because I mean, it's also part of the community, right? We want the community to be enjoying it as a whole.
Right.
So
great advice. Luna, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. I'm Luna. I've been dancing only a few years actually, but very intensely. And I think that was jump-started partly by moving to Buenos Aires pretty early on for a little while, and getting to see some of the huge diversity of tango there, and getting to meet some of the feminist movements and the queer movements. And then working in Europe. And so it's been a sort of global experience that's given me a lot of perspective. And I came into it as a dancer and also as a student of culture and politics. I was studying comparative literature. I think what I would like to get people to get out of this is, if they don't already have this, maybe a shift in the reason of why we're doing this. I think if a lot of people like to think that tango is, you know, somewhere we come for leisure, somewhere we come together, often to get away from a lot of things. But politics and the bigger problems of our world don't drop away in something like tango just because it's a leisure space. And if they drop away for you, that's an expression of power. So I think that for me, like when we listen to these experiences and when we decide to do something about it, it's not about helping somebody else. It's not like that's their problem and now I'm going to be generous. It's really about the kind of world, at least for me, it's about the kind of world I want to live in, and about the kind of world I want to dance in too. So maybe shifting the reason that we're listening and the reason why we're speaking for me is important.
Oh, beautifully said, Luna. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Amanda. Love to hear
Hi,
from you.
everyone. My name is Amanda, and I have been dancing tango since 2009. I started at my university club. Since then, I've sort of tried to expand my experience and knowledge with tango through dancing, DJing, teaching, traveling to other countries, understanding how other people experience tango. I am also Liberian, and I'm American, and I'm Black, and I'm a tanguera. I've lived in so many different places around the US, all the way from Miami to Minnesota to the Midwest to Colorado, and now in the DMV area. So I've had also a lot of different spaces where I've had to wear different hats, let's say, whether it's in academia as an engineer or in my social dancing circle. I also do salsa and other Latin dances. And it's sort of, regardless of which circle I'm in, there's still these nuances, I guess, that we're going to be talking about today that always comes up. And for me, there are a few things that I wrote down that I would hope that we get out of this discussion, which I think some of you ladies have already hinted at. First of all, just acknowledging that we're all biased. I think that's the first step, because we can't even begin to hear what anybody has to say about anything, regardless if it's this discussion now about race or another discussion about gender equality or sexuality or any other thing. We all have to be aware that we are biased, plain and simple. There's no getting around that. And so understanding that, I would hope that moving forward, we can be more supportive to our fellow friends in tango, who listening to other people's struggles, listening and not speaking over and not trying to justify, really supporting people to make them feel seen. I hope, I think, and you'll see as we talk, one of the things is, even though tango is a safe space to be leisure about, outside of your regular world, it's not, the thing about it is, like, being Black is, it's not a hobby, it's not a political affiliation, it's not something you can take on and take off. So, and the same way about other groups that are socially excluded, this isn't something that you can just forget about when you walk into the space of tango. So we should all still be aware of what people are going through, especially if we want this to be a sustaining community, if we want to have a tango community.
Ladies, this is so well said and well spoken. And I just want to reiterate some of the comments that some of the expressions that I've heard. One is that we don't, let's see, how do I explain this? I'll say it from another angle, from sort of maybe a white person's perspective, which is racism feels strange to talk about in tango because a lot of people think that racism is a very overt practice, right? So, and it would be clear when you saw an act of racism, right? Which is like someone saying a racial slur, or someone saying, I'm not dancing with you because of XYZ. But those are not really the place, that doesn't happen nearly as often as these sort of microaggressions, which is this scale of shade of gray, which is ranging from maybe just lack of awareness to exclusion, and all these other shades in between, or discomfort, right? Even sort of a discomfort around addressing a topic is an act against inclusivity. And what I would like people to get out of this conversation is that, as a white person, and for, I take this as my responsibility now, is that the table stakes of being an advocate are not just not being racist. Like, that's not the point of entry of being an advocate. The point of entry, for especially now, feels to me like it needs to be action oriented. And that is basically education for most people, because let's say most people are not actively racist, but they are uncomfortable around the topic of race and uncomfortable of putting themselves out there. And I wonder if we can kind of speak to some of these. And another thing, I guess, is that because people don't see it happening, they assume it doesn't exist. Would you guys sort of agree to that? That that's kind of the problem too, this kind of enlightening. So I would love to kind of jump in the conversation around, okay, what does, if it's not an extreme act like a racial slur, which actually still does happen, and guess what, we're seeing it this week too, where people are kind of de-emphasizing racism as a hot topic because there's something else that needs to be done. I would love for you guys to speak to personal experiences that you've had inside of Tango that exemplifies what we're talking about, this sort of shade of gray. That makes you Nicole's like, yes, I'll start.
Shades of Black.
So, yeah, right, sure. Yeah, well said, shades of black. So Nicole, I'll have you kind of jump in on that, and then everyone can sort of raise their hand when they're feeling inspired. So
yeah, quickly, something I probably should have mentioned in my introduction, even though I started in 2000 and I gave like a solid 10-year obsession with tango, I dance it a couple times a year. At this point, I'm a samba dancer. And the reason why is, I never really felt I broke into the community. And I was always pretty honest with particularly my close friends in tango about that. One thing I would like to say is, I think people don't realize how much you kind of troubleshoot this. So my approach was, well, maybe I need to always dress well, never be casual to the milonga. Maybe I need to take classes with other teachers, not for the skill building aspect, but just so I know as many people in the community as possible. Maybe I need to talk more, move around the floor more, smile more, all these various things that I did, all the way up to deciding I'm going to lead, because maybe if I lead, then I can control dancing. So some of you know I've written about tango and inclusion, and some of those posts you can find on my Facebook page under Nicole M. Hill, MH. I talk about, there's a lot of incidents where maybe you're wondering, am I being overly sensitive? But one of the big moments for me was during my birthday dance, where I started the dance, and then my instructor and friend and musician, there was live music that night, broke in to dance with me. But unfortunately, I couldn't end that dance because nobody broke in. And it was so awkward that Chewy said, I need to finish the song. And still no man broke in, not even a guy who danced with me earlier in the dance. I noticed people weren't looking. And ultimately, my friend Michelle came in. Fortunately, I just started leading. I had a little bit of skill, so I could kind of finish that last 30 seconds. But in all the, but in all the social dance scenes I've been in, I've never seen someone who couldn't finish a birthday dance. And this wasn't a new community. This is a community I had been in for years, where I had, a hug, kiss, hello, with a large number of people who come in the door. But at the end of the day, I wasn't valued on my birthday on the dance floor. And it's really hard to ignore that. And there were other stories too, which I'm not going to get into tonight, but I want people to understand that when they say, do this, do that, they're probably not aware how much we do and think about it to try to mitigate that problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And that's kind of the exemplary of it's not just one incident, right? Where you mark it as it's because of race or or ethnicity, but you keep trying to improve, and you keep saying that it's on me, but then afterwards there's no other reason other than you're just not included into something that you can't really change. And that's really hurtful. And this is kind of an example of the inclusivity, where if people don't feel like they're going to leave, right? And this is what happens to a lot of people inside of Tango if they don't fit a certain undefinable mold for a lot of people of what's the perfect tango partner, that they're always going to feel that edge of exclusion. And then afterwards, they're just going to leave. So thank you for sharing that, Nicole. And Thea, yeah, please.
Yeah, just continuing what you said, I think when we think about the sort of narrow beauty aesthetic in tango, we can all agree it's quite narrow. So when you add black onto that, you can see that it narrows even more. So let's not pretend. You know, I mean, I've had a couple of, well, I've had a lot of incidences, but there are two in particular which I still feel a little bit traumatized by, both in the last couple of years. And I remember being at a milonga on a boat. So it was quite an enclosed space. We were inside the boat at nighttime. And there might have been maybe 40 people there. And I was on that boat for about 3.5 hours. No tandas, like none, in that tiny little space where you can't get out. That was just the worst. And I kind of think if I was a different person, I would have just given up on that day because it was awful. And then, I mean, you just kind of feel like, what can the reason be? I didn't really talk about it that night, but, you know, generally people might say, well, it's because you're tall. And I'm like, so what about the tall Swedish girl over there? She's taller than me. She's 6'2". I'm 6 foot in my heels. What about her? You know, it's just sometimes you feel like you're drowning in it. And then, you know, I had another event where I was at an event in Europe, and I was there 6 hours. I got there just after 12. I was there till 6. And I think I had 3 tandas, and people were, I mean, it got to the point where people were looking into my eyes, and then they would walk and stand behind like a door or a wall. I'm not joking. They would kind of look at me like, yes, I see you, and now I'm going to hide behind that wall. You know, so, you know, we're not imagining this stuff. And this was an event that had about 1,000 people in it. And that probably happened. The looking and then walking away to stand behind somewhere probably happened about 3 times. But then there was lots of looking and then looking away, which is fine. I mean, none of us are saying, you know, everybody should dance with everybody. And I'm not asking, you know, Chicho from Bali to dance with me. Seriously, like, I'm not deluded. I'm really not. But I just feel like,
if you are, this is a personal ask, right? You're like throwing it out there.
I'm just throwing it out there.
If he wants to.
So I just want people to kind of just open up their consciousness to the fact that, you know, Tango is a microcosm of society. And in society, we have racism, we have sexism, we have people who aren't very kind, we have people who are rude. And there's this kind of idea that, you know, oh, I'm so shocked that somebody in Tango could say such a thing or behave in such a way. And I don't really understand that. So I think people need to kind of just become a bit more enlightened about the fact that Tango people are just humans, and sometimes they're not very nice people. We're not special, you know, we're just people.
Right. And you said a couple of things which is sort of, again, one of these spaces that it must be very frustrating, where you're not getting validated around the reason. You know, you said, I didn't dance, and your friend's like, oh, well, maybe it's because you're tall. And I can admit I might probably would have said something like that, because for me, it's like, I don't want you to feel excluded. So I want to make up any other reason why you're not getting dances than because you're Black. And it's like a well-intentioned dig. Like, I'm realizing that now, that it's a well-intentioned, like it's not validating for your experience.
Yeah.
And
I do understand why people say it and why people do it. Like, I understand it, but I think, you know, sometimes if someone's in a painful situation, just, you know, we don't really want, like, there's nothing someone can say if you say, I don't always say why I think it is, but I just don't want people to say it's because you're tall. Like, just say, oh, I'm sorry, that really sucks. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That's all you want. I don't want you to make an excuse. Go on, Nicole.
Just 2 seconds, because other people need to talk too. But you know, I was very vocal with one of my friends about this, and she's a white woman, one of my closest friends. At the time, she was more likely to make those excuses, but years later, in fact, after I started like writing about it, she's like, I was so heartbroken for you. But, you know, she never actually confirmed that until much, much later. So I didn't actually think she ever understood. And I think it went from that trying to make you feel better to like really sinking in for her. You know, please try to validate people, even if you don't catch this immediately. If your perspective changes, please let the people know so that they they feel like, okay, I'm not crazy, and someone gets it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Go for it, Geneva.
I was going to say, just on that same topic of, like you said, that you want, Christina, that you had mentioned that, oh, maybe it's an easy, maybe microaggression, right? To say, oh, maybe it's because you're tall, maybe it's because of this. And I think it's not necessarily, obviously your friends are well intentioned, and I think we all understand that. But I think this is an idea, but it kind of speaks to that idea of like privilege, of not needing or not knowing that could be a reason why people wouldn't dance for you, right? Because if that's never come into your sphere as a reason why a person would reject you, then of course that doesn't come to your mind, right? You think of all the other things that would apply to you, right? Like, oh, when I wasn't dancing, what was it about, right?
Yeah, like I was in a bad mood, or yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. And so that's that idea of like I was talking about about being aware of others' like experience, right? Not just taking what is happening and applying what you know of your experience to them,
Mm-hmm.
And like Anthea said, it's an easy mistake. We're all human, so of course we think of our experience when we're trying to show empathy or sympathy for another, right? That's kind of like the definition of how we try to connect in that way. But in some cases, you kind of have to think outside of that a little bit. And I think that is the part that I feel like we, and it's and it's not it's not a place or time, or even maybe the other person doesn't feel like explaining that, especially in the milonga, especially when they would rather be dancing as opposed to explaining my experience. Right.
Yeah. Amanda, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was thinking about two different scenarios. So I think we can all agree, I think we did all agree on this before when we were talking about this. We all go through this. This is assuming the playing field is equal, assuming we've all taken the classes to be better dancers, right? Assuming that we dress well, assuming that we smell nicely, we fix our hair well, we smile, we're friendly, we network, we don't come with just intention to dance, but I'm just here to enjoy and be friends with people. And if I dance, I dance. That's assuming, just to put a little clarification here, that's assuming all of that has already been established. Moving from there, it's still sometimes difficult to get through. So that's why at some point, someone who's dark skinned would be like, well, maybe it's because of the color of my skin, because what else could it possibly be? And the thing too is, it's not just on the dance floor in the milonga. I have been skipped in classes before, and it's been so obvious, where at first I was like, oh, well, sometimes when the guy is going down the circle, sometimes, like, depending on where you end up, you may get skipped. But one time in class, this was very early on, but this was like a very, very small class. There's like only so many people they can go through. And I intentionally placed myself, after the first like 1 or 2 times that I noticed it, I placed myself right next to him, and he still managed it. And I cannot tell you how my heart sunk in that moment, feeling so less than, other times, several times, even as late as a couple years ago, I don't remember exactly when, but I've been asked, oh, what are you doing here in a milonga? Who goes to a without the intention of dancing? Like, random people don't show up in a milonga. I've been asked this by people in the milonga, even by one time this happened in New York, where like a friend of a friend who didn't dance, they brought their friend to the milonga, and so I was there, and they introduced them, like, oh, hi, nice. So he came into our space. I'm in my dance clothes. I'm in my heels, and he's like, so what are you doing here? And I'm like, nothing. Just here for the drink, And there's like little things like that.
Yeah.
Really, it's more than just not being asked to dance, because there's so many other complex issues with asking people to dance that we're not even going to get into. So there's something there. And so when you experience all these things and then you go into the dance floor, and in addition to all of these things, you're also not asked to dance, when assuming that you are, like, your skill level, everything is equal to those who are being asked to dance, that's when we come up with these ideas. And that's when hopefully our friends are like, you know what, you're probably right, I'm really sorry. And then
and Amanda, from my perspective of you, I spoke about this yesterday. First of all, I didn't know you when you were first starting, but I know you in the past few years. And I'm like, from my perspective, I'm like, okay, someone like Amanda is an amazing dancer. She certainly gets, she's a leader in her community. She's a teacher and she's an organizer. I couldn't imagine you having problems. Like I couldn't imagine you that being an issue, because I view you as so well loved and a very popular, right? But it doesn't mean that you didn't have that in the past. You know, maybe it surfaces now, but it's less now. But it didn't mean that you didn't experience that in the past. And my lack of awareness, because I just assume, I'm like, well, it's Amanda. Everyone wants to dance with Amanda. It doesn't mean that you didn't have any hardship. And
well, and I guess even now, more so, the issue that I come across is more like this, and I'm sure you guys all talked about this before. There's a moment where you connect with someone and it's so beautiful because you're like, it's like we're telepathic, right? This tangasm. And you're both so excited about this connection. And then sometimes it's just that little extra level of shock that how could you possibly be able to do this and with me? And I know it sounds like maybe I'm being crazy, right?
oh no, it doesn't.
But sometimes you can tell the difference. I don't know how, I can't, and that's why it's so difficult to pinpoint, right? Because these are actions that are being perceived. It's not so overt.
Yeah.
Right. And so you really feel like you're crazy for feeling this way, but it happens.
Luna, you have similar experiences from a different vantage point, I imagine, because your inclusivity is around being inclusive as a leader, being included as a queer woman and what that means in terms of inclusivity. And I would love to hear you sort of speaking to that.
Sorry. Yeah, I think that what Amanda's saying about it not being so, you can't be like, that person said this, right? It's much more subtle than that. But I think that we as tango dancers should be able to deal with that, right? We're working in a field that is totally nonverbal most of the time. Everything that happens in the body, and you pick up really subtle cues because that's how we dance. I was just translating and co-organizing a series of queer tango discussions that were happening in the queer tango community around the world. And one of the things that we sort of got to as a very good tool in tango to think about matters of inclusion is something that already exists in tango, and that's escucha, right? That's listening. Because it means showing up to really seeing that person and feeling that person. And we can talk more about that later, but just in terms of experience of discrimination, you really know, because you're trained to listen for that. And also you've probably been trained your whole life. In my case, and I think in the case of many other queer people, especially if you're switching to the quote unquote other role, right? We've all experienced someone literally backing away, like literally shying away as you go towards them or as you turn your head to them. You know what that feels like too. And I think that many of us also hesitate to ask people to dance. I know that I, as a leader, am very careful about asking anybody to dance because I don't necessarily want to set myself up for that. And I don't want you to feel like you have to dance with me. I don't want you to feel like you're doing me a favor. I don't want you to feel, disgusted, basically. And that you really feel all of that. So I think that people, my takeaway from this is biases exist. We live in a world of biases. And if you don't work through those, if you don't educate yourself and think about those things and subtly change the way you think, they're all going to come out in your dance and we feel all of them, and it's really unpleasant.
Yeah, you say a great point, which is like just accepting that we have biases is like maybe step one, which is like, I have to admit that about myself, that if I don't at least acknowledge that, then we'll never be able to see where I can improve. But this denial that is really problematic makes us not being able to empathize or reflect on our own actions. I wanted to go ahead, Nicole. Yeah.
I just wanted to, because we're obviously spending a lot of time talking about the Black experience, but I just wanted to plus one Luna, because when I started trying to lead as my ultimate solution to solving this problem, the first challenge was I would go into these beginner classes and they were like, great, Nicole's a follower, because this new guy this is his first class you follow. And so I ultimately ended up taking private lessons until I could hang out in an intermediate or advanced class, because I would not get a shot as a woman. And I remember one of my close friends at the time, who, a conservative person, just wasn't comfortable dancing with a woman. And she knew I was straight. So I can't even imagine as an LGBT, a queer woman, a lesbian, what that experience is like, because people will then put that extra layer of bias and what do you want, and make it a sexual thing, when really you're just there to do what we all do, like explore this wonderful art form. I'm hoping these days it's a little bit easier for all women to break in, but I imagine it's still a huge challenge for the LGBT to be accepted. You know, we all talk about, we know it's not, we tell our friends outside of Tango, it looks sexual, but it's not. But we forget that when it comes to the LGBT, and we just assume that.
Go ahead, Luna.
Yeah, I think just to talk about the sexualizing, right? We were talking the other day about attractiveness in Tango, and how people are always like, well, it's my preference, you know, and there's this mixing of, you know, you're dancing with someone because you're attracted to them, and you're dancing with someone because you want to dance with them. And, you know, everything's messy, that's fine. But let's not pretend that you need to be attracted to somebody to dance with them, because speaking as a queer woman, I dance with so many men that I am not attracted to. And guess what? We still find something, because I'm able to find something lovely with you, even though, and feel your dance without being attracted to you. And I think that everyone knows this, right? And yet there's something about, for example, the sexualization of, like, the scary sexualization of queer people, of trans people, of other people in whatever sense. It's not just about sexuality, that has to do with, like, you can see a woman dancing with someone 40 years her senior, and that's not a problem, because she knows she can tell what kind of interaction that is and whether she wants to be there. And then that same woman will see me or a more masculine presenting woman and just be like, no, that I can't, that's whoa. You know. And so I say this also, I just want to emphasize, I say this as someone who can slip into straight communities, because I can pass, you know, no, people don't necessarily look at me and know what my sexual orientation is, but other people in my community who are more obviously gender nonconforming, who are more masculine, who somehow don't fit into Tango's really heteronormative standards of how you're supposed to look to be a real Tango person, you know, it's often intolerable. And I think it's I mean, personally, some of my best dances have happened with my, you know, trans masculine friends or partners. And yeah, I mean, y'all are missing out, first of all. But second of all, it's really, it becomes impossible. And so that's part of why we have queer spaces.
Yeah. I wanted, I don't know if Jamila feels called to talk about this story, which is like, well, some of it, let's see. Some of it is exposure, right? We don't know what we don't like. We don't know what works for us. So we keep ourselves a little bit limited in terms of our approach. And Jamila, you had a funny story. Yes, not funny, but we were laughing about it. With the way that you told it was funny, which is like you had a friend and like hanging out with them for a year, and then finally like they ask you to dance. And but I would love to you tell that story.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a matter of, I think we had talked about this again yesterday about like exposure and or about paying attention to something that may not be what you like, may not be what you are used to, or may not be what you are paying attention to, or may not be what you're initially attracted to. when you enter into a milonga, right? So this is again about the idea of looking at others or experiencing, like Luna said, or opening your ideas to what is available for you to experience in the milonga. And so in this story, like I had mentioned, that this was a guy that was like friends of a friend. And so we ended up at the same table at milongas often. We went to a couple of, you know, small like house events with friends in common often. And he just never asked me to dance. I tried a couple of times and I thought, well, okay, you don't want to dance with me, that's fine. You know, I'm not going to think anything about it. And, you know, just continued. I can still be nice to people if they don't necessarily want to dance with me. That doesn't exclude them as like friends. So fast forward a couple of months, I don't even know how long I had been interacting with him. And we ended up at a milonga, and I don't know, maybe he just really liked the song or whatever. And he finally was like, oh, Jamila, do you want to dance? And I was like, sure. So we got up and danced. And after the first song, you know, when you're usually, he was like, oh, you're a very nice dancer. I was like, well, thank you.
And it's that shock, like, wow.
Right. Like, and it's not like he just arrived in town or hasn't seen me dancing with his other friends, you know? Like, or maybe, I mean, maybe that's the point. Maybe he didn't see me. We had talked about this the other day about like, I just was not in his radar, right? Of things to see. I literally kind of had to be sitting beside him at this time. And the music had so moved him that he was like, oh, I just need to dance, right? And I think, you know, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't know what he was thinking, but like why he decided to ask me to dance at that moment, right? I'm going to assume that he was so driven or inspired by the music. But, you know, it was almost like he was shocked. And I don't know, like, should I take that as a compliment that you've known me for, you know, 6-9 months, a year, and that now you've just realized that I may be able to dance at a level that you could enjoy it, you know? So yeah, that's.
And Anthea, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be quick, Amanda. Just continuing from what Jamila said, and we talked about this yesterday, about the idea of a Black woman as a certain thing in a box. So I believe, I mean, I can't prove this, it's just my theory, but I think because of the dominant ideology of the Black woman as, this is general, I'm not saying everybody feels like this, but angry, aggressive, sexual, domineering. Did I say aggressive?
Aggressive. Okay. Very like.
And so I think for some people, it's very difficult for them to think of us as elegant, sophisticated, graceful, gentle, someone they can connect with. Like they don't look at us and see that. So they're not looking at you. I mean, I've been to milongas and there's been a friend of mine who might be a professional and I've danced with him. Normally that would mean I would be dancing all night. No, because no one's looking. They kind of look, as I said to you, they see dancer, 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 Black woman, dancer, dancer, Black woman, dancer, 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 dancer. They don't see a tangera, they see a Black woman. And I really think that might have been why he didn't ask you to dance previously, because he kind of thought, nah, she's not going to be all slinky and, you know, elegant and graceful. And as Nicole said about connection, I just want to read out a quote of one of her pieces. Do you want me to read it, Nicole, or do you want to read it?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, so this is a quote from Nicole, which I really like, and I think it explains everything. And she was writing about an idea called, is it Ubuntu?
Yeah.
Which means togetherness, right? And one of the paragraphs in this very well-written piece, which you can find on her page, said, we have to acknowledge that some people dance all night while others sit all night. While it brings us comfort to explain it away with notions of indescribable but inherent connection and technique, she's put those words in quotes. The truth is, who you connect to is often determined by personal or societal biases, and nowhere in the world does there exist a true meritocracy. And she also said, people don't always feel a connection to those that look different from themselves. And I think that is something that we need to recognize and be mindful of, and question it.
Yeah.
Maybe try to act outside of that, which is partly to do with human survival, when we all lived in caves and had our tribes and had to stick with the people who look like us, but we're not there anymore. And I think we need to break out of that and move on a little bit.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I mean, I talk about this issue a lot. And again, I'm coming from this as someone with a PhD in psychology. Your brain is wired for biases for very good reasons, to make quick decisions. I think where it becomes, and that keeps you alive, literally. But
right, it's a survival
but where it becomes a problem is that we think of this is a fair world, and then we think of who I'm connected to. I think in Tango, because I've had people comment on threads and whatnot, there's this idea that if we dance with people that we're not connected to, that we have to drop our standards, that dance is not going to be as good. Yes, if it's a beginner, that might be true, but there's just, skill has nothing to do with your connection. Yesterday we joked, hopefully there aren't too many children, but we talked about connection versus fuckability. And so I did say it, I went there, but true. It's like,
it's good.
The way you feel because you're attracted to someone is not necessarily an indication of their skill level or this connection idea. We bring all of our biases from the outside world there, and just be mindful of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely will be another topic around sort of the sexual viability in Tango, and how that propels us to dance with certain people or not. But I guess I just wanted to speak to, in general, the inclusivity, which is, if we take the longer term approach to sustainability in Tango, and if we all imagine, white or not white, that we want to be dancing for decades, that means we're going to be getting older, right? And then that means inherently a bias may come up. So why not try to solve problems now? Because then we'll all be faced with that problem anyway of inclusivity. We're going to feel it, that I'm not as popular. And I'm just speaking from like an age perspective, because that's another level of inclusivity. But we have to admit that these exist. So let's solve the problem. We don't have to take an either or approach to things around, well, I'm here for myself, so I want to do what I want to do. You can have your own distinct needs inside of Tango, and also take a nod to the longer term solution that's actually going to benefit you anyway, right? Where it's like, inclusivity is going to help everyone and keep a robust community going, and it's going to be more pleasurable for a longer term. And I can also feel like I can get some of the things that I want out of Tango. I can also feel like I'm empowered to choose who and what I dance with. If I take a broader approach, I'm probably going to feel more excited by it anyway, be pleasantly surprised. And isn't that the thing that is one of the greatest gifts around Tango, when you don't know someone and you dance with them and you connect with them and you're like, oh my God, I took this chance. I didn't know this person. Like, that's one of the pleasures of Tango, is to be kind of like surprised. So, but you'll never be surprised if you never go outside of your bubble.
And that's just very quickly, we talked about Ubuntu for a minute, which is an African proverb that says, I am because we are. So like, the community is great. Tango is great because it's made up of people. But Nelson Mandela has a quote, which I don't remember exactly, but he says, basically says, it's not a tension between enriching yourself and giving to the community, but thinking about how you can satisfy your own needs, enrich yourself in a way that helps the community also be enriched. So just this idea, it's a false dichotomy that I either have to enjoy the dance or have to be inclusive. That's just not true.
Right. You're either suffering, you're doing like community service, which is implying that it's some suffering involved, which I don't really like. Yeah. So, go ahead, Anthea.
I just wanted to reiterate what you and Nicole have just said, that we're not asking for pity dances. We're not saying you shouldn't have autonomy on who you dance with. Like, I don't dance with anyone I don't want to dance with, because, you know, I don't. But that doesn't mean I don't dance with people who, I mean, I don't like to talk about levels, but it doesn't mean I don't dance with beginners or people who might not have been dancing as long. It's not really about that. I just want equal dance rights, as I like to think about it. I just want equal dance rights. I want to be rejected for the same reasons as everybody else. I don't want the other thing, the other little bit of the mountain that I have to climb to get on an equal level. Like, I don't want that. I just want to make that clear. Like, I'm not asking everyone to dance with me. I totally understand. Because if everyone dances with you, what is you've got nothing to work towards. You've got nothing to strive for. You've got no reason to improve. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I think part of that goes towards being seen. You know, I think at this point, when you've been dancing long enough, if you show up into a crowd, if you don't already know people, usually you take a moment to watch the dance floor, see where people are, how people are moving, and some people will catch your eye or not. I think the issue is just having a darker skin just sort of creates a blind spot. So you don't even see someone to even then think, oh, I don't like the way they dance, or that's interesting. So even just getting to being seen, so then you can be judged as to whether or not you want to be danced with, that's like part of the issue. And I think that's all we're really asking for at the end of the day.
And how are they not seeing you when you're the only Black girl in the room anyway? I mean, can we have a conversation about that?
Exactly.
I'm like,
me and Jamila,
Jamila
and I used to walk in
Jamila.
and just count the people. Go on.
I mean, people think I am like, one of my very, very good friends, she's Indian. People literally cannot tell the difference between us.
It's amazing. Like, this idea of not being seen. I have like a million examples of this, but I want to talk because Anthea knows. So I used to make a joke about it, but I feel like it's serious. Like, if I decide to change my hair, right, in a milonga, I have been in, like we talked about, in Argentina, in the same milongas.
A different person.
For 8 years, right? You know who I am. Like Anthea said, often I am the only Black woman in the milonga. More often than not, if there's 3, it's a party, right?
You know where they are if there's 3 in there.
Yeah. More often than not, I'm the only one. I've been the only one all week. I've been the only one all month. I've been coming to this milonga. If I change my hair and it's straight, literally people walk by, and they talking to people at the table next to me, and I'm like, hello. And then like, Jamila, I didn't see you there. How do you not see me? I'm gonna get us. Literally, like, this is an act of not, how do you not see me? What does that mean? You didn't see me there?
Like, there's a whole human being, like, physically you can't, like, physics. You can't be in the same place.
Literally, like, I think Anthea said, like, tango dancer, possible tango dancer, Black lady, I don't know. Like, they just get right over, right? Tango dancer, right? What is that? How does that even work in your head? I'm like, and I literally told people that, like, if you see, I had this joke with a friend, and I said, I don't understand that. You can't tell me this. Don't tell me this anymore. I said, here's what we're going to do. If you see a Black person in a milonga that you don't know, you should assume there's a 50% chance it's me. And you should go over and say hello. And if you get closer and you realize it's not me, you should say hello anyway. And then you should tell her that Jamila told me to come and say hello, because I have a problem.
Jamila, go, keep going. Yeah.
Oh, no, and he was like, so you think they're gonna be? He was like, is that? You think I should just go and say hello to them because you told me to? I said yes, and they'll understand. When you say Jamila told me, she's the other Black girl. You'll see her soon. She'll be here late in the milonga. She told me to come and say hello. I said, if it's not me, when you get closer, you just go ahead and say hello. This is what we're going to do from now on.
I mean,
Because it's ridiculous. Don't tell me you didn't know it was me from across the milonga, so you didn't come and say hello. I don't want to hear that anymore.
Once upon a time, that would have been me, because they would think I was you. That's the whole other story.
yeah.
So, okay, this is, I feel like we could like triage in a couple of different ways from your
Anyway.
topic. One would be like the amount of Black people inside of Tango, right? Where we're like, why, you know, and I told you guys the story, and we all see it too. I went down to Argentina the first time, I don't know, it was like over a decade ago, and just being on the street, and I was like, where are all the Black people? I was like, it was before I really understood any kind of historical context. I was like, I haven't seen one Black person all day. Like, and I've come from West Philly, and where that's extremely common. So it was kind of abrupt. And then of course, inside of Tango, if you're at a festival, you see three or four, you know, Black people, that's kind of the norm. And then you're like, why? And then if you do any kind of research, you're like, oh, okay, because they were killed, right? Because, you know, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 years ago, there was a you know, just this
Genocide.
Genocide, excuse me, I was lacking the word. And then you're like, okay, now I can maybe understand the correlation. But so then you start to wonder what comes first. Like, there's not enough Black representation in Tango. And because there's not enough Black representation in Tango, more Black people don't really feel comfortable joining inside of Tango. And then you're like in this feedback loop, right? So, and if anyone wants to sort of explain that or talk to it, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I don't know if I can explain all of that, but one thing I hope to take away today is, you know, Tango has African roots, right? And the most we say in general, I've heard things as vague as milonga is closest, notice that word, closest to the African, and we leave it at that. And so I ask people, particularly if you are actually even Argentine and speak Spanish, where you can like research it in more depth than those of us who don't speak that language, why aren't we more curious about that? Because we're talking about like Tango people. When I describe tangueras and to other people, it's like, oh, we're super studious. We need to know about the orchestras, how to combine songs together, understanding the technique. Why do we not dig in a little deeper into the Black roots, including the history of what happened to Black people in Argentina, being on the front lines of wars and disproportionately dying from yellow fever, probably disproportionately, like just like Black people are dying disproportionately from COVID. So I encourage everyone to be curious. And when we talked the other day, I mentioned, you know, I've talked to people, serious Tango people who've been dancing for a while, who've never watched the documentary Tango Negro, which was in 2012. If you were dancing in 2012 and you didn't watch that movie, go watch it now on Netflix. If you've been dancing for any length of time and you want to understand the history, let's not just talk about the gauchos and the immigrants of Tango who brought the music, like understand the rhythmic base. In that documentary, they talk about, and they give the example through music of how if you remove that African influence, you cannot create any tango, whether it's slow, fast, or in between. And I do mean tango, not milonga. Pierre from the Philadelphia community has been putting out this great content on showing the pictures of Black people dancing, explaining how when you slow down what's called the Congo African drum rhythm, that sounds very, very stereotypical of what you might think of African drumming. When you slow it down, it's the milonga beat, exactly the milonga beat. So let's be more curious about that Black contribution in a consistent way that we are curious about every other aspect of tango, because that is also erased, not just the Black dancers in the room.
Yeah, exactly. Would anyone else like to sort of speak to that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that goes back to, you know, tango is formed partly through this transnational crossing, and there is a lot of colonialism involved and colonial ideology involved in how tango is even made, right? And so I think we're not done with that, and I think it's worth interrogating what we value in the dance, what parts we pay attention to, what parts we think are worth emulating and what parts are, you know, weird or like just not good, right? Like what we say, no, that's wrong. And, you know, there are some things we can agree on, right? Maybe mutual comfort, musicality, right? But beyond that, what are we valorizing and what are we not? I think it's related. And while we're at it, I think, just speaking of the colonial issue, we were talking the other day about how often, especially when it comes to sexism, but pretty much any prejudice, right? Also, like, there's no Black people in Argentina, quote unquote. There's so much reference to Argentina as a justification for pretty much anything anyone wants to do, because it just becomes this like supposed blank slate where it's like, oh, there it's really sexist, there's no Black people. So, you know, we're just going with tradition, quote
There
unquote.
it's a man and a woman dancing, like,
Right, exactly. So as if, first of all, you know, Argentina wasn't a breathing, living culture that is very diverse and full of many people with many different ideas. And also as if, you know, people within Argentina weren't working with or against these things that you think are defining. Personally, I've never experienced such a strong feminist movement as when I was living in Buenos Aires. I found such incredible queer communities and queer ally communities. And Tango was so diverse. Like, I think it's totally wrong, the perception a lot of people have. And also, as if there wasn't sexism and racism and all sorts of other biases in your own community, right? Like, it's sort of this idea that it's somebody else's fault. But we have to deal with who we are here and where we are.
right. It gets very tiring when people say, well, that's the traditional tango, but the traditional tango that they're talking about excludes people or excludes a specific way of interacting. And under the guise that it's traditional is just a really, like, it's a tired reason. So I really understand what you're saying, Luna. You said it so beautifully, as if it's not a living, breathing thing right now, as if it's not always evolving and trying to come to terms with what's happening relevant to right now in the world. So does anybody else want to sort of jump in on that? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Andrea.
I just wanted to tie in what Luna and Nicole said. So on Luna's part about the colonialist aspect, and on Nicole's part as well. And I was just thinking that I think tango seems to have kind of been whitewashed. So in Argentina, it's just something that people do. It doesn't have like a cachet attached of kind of sophistication or whatever. And mainly the people who dance tango are not sort of elite, because, you know, a surgeon can't dance tango in Buenos Aires, and Milonga's closed at 6. He's got heart surgery tomorrow morning. Whereas in Europe, you know, it's full of consultants, architects, surgeons, engineers, lecturers. Like, it's a very elite sport, in inverted commas. And therefore, that to me means that sexism, elitism, racism are going to intersect and create the problem that we're talking about now, because a lot of the people in tango, outside, or in the tango diaspora, I should say, are kind of middle to upper middle class. So they're not hanging around with a lot of people who are not white, because that's just how society works. So even to the base level of, there are certain men who cannot imagine having a woman of color in their arms. It's just not something they can imagine. It's just like, you know, and I think that's part of the reason. I think it's been colonialized, really, and the roots have been whitewashed, and it's sad. And also that's why I think that, because I also dance salsa, like, not just something that I do because when I can't dance tango, like, I do take classes, and I started learning to lead in salsa before the pandemic. And tango is the only dance where people feel the need to denigrate other dances in order to, what's the word I'm looking for? Raise the value of tango.
Elevate.
Like, tango people are obsessed with like, yeah, go and dance salsa if you don't want to do this. And it's almost like they have this idea that salsa is just something that you can do and you don't need any technique. Yeah, you can if you want to be just a below average, just a basic dancer. But if you want to dance well, and if you want to dance a certain style of salsa, you're going to have technique. You're going to have to take classes. You're going to have to learn how to use your body in the correct way. It's not just a dance that you can just do if you want to do it well and with like body and meat and passion. But I don't know, there's just this thing of, yeah, let's just yeah, salsa, whatever. And obviously, you know, if I had to choose one, then I would choose tango. However, that doesn't mean that salsa means any less. And people in salsa, they're not walking around going, oh, blues dancing, oh, Lindy Hop, it's so basic. Like, no people in any dances talk like that. That is specific to tango.
Yeah, so there's just
an think about why that is. And sometimes I think maybe because salsa is so diverse, part of the issue in tango is it's so diverse, therefore it must be really basic and we don't care. So I think that all of those things bleed into each other. Kind of sexism, racism, elitism, you know, they all kind of bleed into each other in tango and create this kind of toxicity that really kind of grinds my gears sometimes.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point.
Just quickly, and then I was hoping Jamila could share something we talked about yesterday, but 100%, as someone who dances tango 3 times a year and is now hardcore into samba, even before I started that, so many times people were like, once you dance tango, you'll never dance anything else. And I remember getting in a fight with some people on Facebook once. It wasn't the nicest comment, but I was so angered by the fact that many tango dancers don't explore anything else and kind of talk down to other dances. And I was like, you guys, you know, a lot of tango is people of average dance ability, average musicality, thinking that they are these elite professional dancers and they're better than everyone else. And particularly on the rhythmic front, like go to some other spaces and do that and tell me that it's so easy and that you're so great. Like it's the only dance community that I know of where people don't actively forget about dancing, but like watch other types of dance videos and share them. Like, oh my God, that amazing African tribal dance from this country, or that swing dancer, or that. And, you know, tango has been influenced by other dances and styles. If we only limit ourselves to tango, I think we're actually making ourselves pretty mediocre dancers, and we're not going to grow and evolve. Not just individually, but like the whole art form, tango is not the same as it was in the past because of other influences. So this idea that we're better and we don't have to look at anything else, I think that's the death of a dance or any discipline, to not grow and evolve. And then please, Jamila, talk to us about what we were talking about the other day. I think it's really
I want to build off of that, and I will go into, I think that it moves easily into those things, but kind of like what you were saying, Anthea was saying, like this idea that, and I have noticed that I think the times that I've been back in the US, or the times that I have experienced like the people's like approach to tango, you know, I think that and this is just kind of basing from living in Buenos Aires, that I think that in the United States, there's, like you said, Anthea, it's this extra hobby, like it's for people that already have other big careers, and it's like this kind of elite or specialized. I feel like tango dancers are specialists, right? This is a specialized hobby that they have gone into, and often I think people approach it in that same kind of energy, like as something to learn and to achieve and to make progress in, which is why we kind of hear this kind of idea of how many dances or how many classes or what all of this.
Consumption. It's like I consume it, like I consume other things.
I'm going to take in this and I'm going to take in this. And also I'm going to move through it the way I approach, you know, let's just say like my career or something, right? And if you have, like you said, Anthea, these people that are coming from these spaces where their career takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication, that's not a bad thing by any means, right? But then they approach their hobbies in the same way that they approach this. And so you get this kind of difference. And I feel like in Buenos Aires, there's such a bigger mix. Like Anthea said, like if you are going to seriously be like a heart surgeon in Buenos Aires, you're not going to be dancing tango. Maybe you get to dance once a week on Saturdays, but like right, we are out in Buenos Aires till 6 o'clock in the morning. You don't like, you can't have a regular job and you can't be a regular person and like live a regular life and dance tango seriously the way that people get obsessed with it here. And so I think you see what happens is people coming in. Of course there are dancers, I'm not saying there aren't, there are people with professional careers in tango.
I do know a heart surgeon who's a dancer.
Exactly. I was gonna say that. I know like some people that work at the embassy. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying overarchingly, right? Like this idea that people come into tango in Buenos Aires for very different reasons, oftentimes the more social reasons, which I think also goes back to this. Like we had talked about like attraction and things like that, that will kind of circle back around there, right? About why they're in the milonga in the first place. Right, it's much more social, but you also are getting people from like a wider range of socioeconomic class.
Yeah.
So in tango in Buenos Aires, we already know that there's not a wide variety of different people. There aren't Black people, there aren't a wide variety of other people. So even though we're getting people from a different socioeconomic class, they're still not having that exposure. In the United States, however, we're not getting people from a different socioeconomic class, by and large. Of course, these are generalizations, right? By and large. And so therefore, they are exposed to the people that they are exposed to, which goes around back to like we were talking about earlier, about like, who do you connect with? Who do you see yourself? Who do you recognize in a milonga? And I think that, I don't even know who said it. I'm like, we were talking about, and Nicole said it, about trying to understand where people use tango or the history or the culture of tango to excuse something that is happening now in the United States or now in tango, and like, oh, it's because it's the patriarchy, or it's because, right, we don't include, like, that is not a problem because that's how they do it in Argentina. And I feel like that's not always true. And I hear things. I think what had brought it up yesterday when we were discussing it is Nicole was saying, I don't know if you knew someone, or what if someone had like an eye tracking disorder and they weren't able to cabeceo, and then they would kind of feel left out, right? This disability excludes them from tango because we have to use cabeceo, and it's the only way things are done in Buenos Aires, right? And while by and large, people do use cabeceo in Buenos Aires, it's not the only thing. I think like tango continues to evolve in that way, and they are very community minded in this way. And so there's a lady, and I should have looked up her name because I still don't remember her name, but that I see often in the milongas, who is legally blind, right? She has a cane, and she comes to the milongas, and all the milongas know, I mean, she has her regular milongas, of course, like anyone does. But whenever she arrives in a milonga, the community as a whole takes care of her in that way, right? Like they're like, if she needs to be introduced to the organizer, she's introduced to the organizer. And then the organizers make sure she has a table where there's a lot of like traffic, where people are walking by, and she has a sign that she puts out that says that I can't see, so I'm not making cabeceo, and you can ask me to dance. And people bring people and introduce her to people, and people make sure that she dances. So there's no like lack of inclusivity or lack, like, well, if you can't do it the way they do it in Argentina, you can't be included, right? I'm gonna stop talking. I felt like that was a long rant. But I think that kind of, there was a lot of things in there that we had been talking about. And I think it's important to kind of, the idea, like we were saying earlier, is to think differently about these things, to think in a way that's not coming from how you would think, because, you know, your life is set up in a way that oftentimes, if we're talking about like more cis white gendered people, right, that it's really easy to think about how you experience the world, and it does take a little extra effort to think about how other people experience the world. And I think when we're talking about inclusion in tango, that's what's needed and necessary.
Beautifully said. Go ahead, Luna, please.
Yeah, I also want to say that's a really wonderful point. And I think it also is about how you, as a white person, experience the world. Because, you know, I think we really do live in a society that is saturated by these biases. And we internalize it. You know, I am mixed race. I remember as a kid, you know, very much less experiences of racism, but I've had my own internalized ones too, right? I remember being as a kid, like drawing all these blonde princesses and, you know, thinking blue eyes were the be all and end all of beauty, you know, for a minute there. And I personally had to work and reframe my idea of what was beautiful and reframe my own relation to my own looks, to my mother's looks, you know, to my friends' looks, because those things run really deep. And so I think, and the stakes also are not just about, you know, a Disney princess diversity lineup, right? The stakes, and I think we're seeing that in this country right now, are life and death for many people. And, you know, and also just another note, right? All of these different isms are totally not, they overlap, they're not exclusive. I think about the fact that it's June and there's already been 12 trans people murdered in the United States of America. I think about the fact that Black trans women, right? Black trans women, think about like all the overlapping oppressions there, are the people who are most likely to be killed in this country. You know, so just like, as we think about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDowd, who's a trans masculine person, and so many others, I think the work of listening, right, and both to our own biases and to the experiences of others that we might not be able to access all the time is more important than ever. And I think we're seeing that. People are being vocal about that. People are putting their bodies on the line and being arrested because enough is enough. So I think that every drop in the bucket of self-reflection, of talking to people, of listening is really, really worth doing.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I think we sort of, so tango is it's a culture and a dance. It's a cultural dance, I guess. And so it's been transplanted to so many different countries where the cultures are different. And so you sort of tend to pick and choose the parts that you, as the majority of that each society best relate to, and then you say this is tango, right? And but like hearing stories from Jamila, and I'm sure, and from other people who I know that are from Argentina, it seems like it's more of a community, and I think we lost that aspect when it came to the U.S. And it's even more difficult in the U.S. Not that it doesn't, I'm sure it happens in other countries, but more difficult in the U.S. because our community is more mixed. Whereas I think in other countries, it's more of like a monolithic society a little bit, where there are some immigrants, right? But like Black people in America are not immigrants. We are Americans at the end of the day, which makes it even more difficult because it's not like these other people coming into the country. It's the people in the country.
Yeah.
And so I think this idea, and I know this is like just one isolated situation that you described, not that the community aspect is isolated, but Jamila, when you talked about how people, the whole community tends to sort of take care of this woman, and it made me think like, I think if we really want to embrace the culture and the spirit of tango, I think that includes taking care of our community. Simple things like introducing people to each other, right? I mean, I know some milongas I've been to here in the US, that the hosts, the organizer for the milonga will do that. And at first I was like, wow, that's nice. I never even realized that that's probably something that's every day in Argentina, right? Because I've never been, I'm like the one person here who hasn't been. I've seen like maybe like 2 or 3 people here in the US do that. And it's like, now I'm thinking about it, like, why don't we do that more? Why don't we introduce each other to each other more and appreciate that if someone's being introduced to you, it's because that person, maybe you have a connection with them on some level that you don't know yet, right? It's not just trying to like sell out people for dances or whatever. I think that will help because in a way we have to validate each other. I mean, we can validate ourselves, I guess. I don't know if that's wrong to say that we need other people to validate us. And I don't think that's what I mean. But having the support from within the community will help others who just see you as that other thing over there. I think when like the non-Black people within the Tango community see other non-Black people within the Tango community also being inclusive to everybody, that is sort of like you're setting an example for how to behave. But if everyone's sort of quiet, you kind of, yeah, I know, I understand it's horrible, but what to do?
Yeah, and I also want to say, I mean, I think I want to echo what you said, like, you know, Tango is like this exotic animal that's been transplanted in all these different countries, and it may change and behave differently depending on the context in which it lives in. And in the American context, you know, the way that we are like consumers and capitalists and individual first, like that's our culture, right? And in other cultures, like Latin cultures, have a family first kind of idea. And so it's easier for them to feel like they serve the community more than they serve their individual needs. So I think, you know, that's something to kind of like reflect upon when we're going out to dance, or we're out to Tango, and I'm like, I'm here to get my needs met. And but it's to what expense, right? At what it's costing something in the long run, which is like, we're going to have more fractured community if we don't feel like we're also putting pennies in the jar over here, if we're just always constantly taking. So it's worth thinking about and rethinking, and then acknowledging that that's where we're coming from, and we may need a re-education.
Just really quickly. Oh, yeah. And I've been there. My first couple of years, I would show up 9 p.m. expecting to dance until 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. Mm-hmm. Like, why am I not getting these dances? What's going on? And it took a very long time for me to understand that it's more than just a dance. Sure. So I think all of us who have reached that understanding, it's so important that we push that to everybody coming in. Yeah. Because people coming in only know how we, you know, they don't understand all the building blocks. They won't get it until they've been doing it for so many years. Yeah. So we have to be the ones to push that kind of atmosphere. And it's not just the teachers too. It's also like, you know, I teach in Tango. Amanda, I'm not sure if you, Luna, you teach in Tango, and I'm not sure, Jamila, if you do or not, but like, it's not just the teacher's responsibility to teach culture. It's like it has to happen from many people. And that's just the way that it needs to be. So I want to make sure that gets conveyed. I'm like kind of lost for words right now, but I'll just go over to Nicole. I have something else I want to weigh in, but I'll stop there. I feel like it's a longer conversation.
A couple things to say. So I dance Brazilian samba, which is nothing to do with ballroom samba. Sorry, ballroom dancers. It's the real samba from Brazil. And it's as old as tango. And sorry, I'm being mean. I'm being elitist. I'm going to stop that. But the one thing that's amazing about Brazilian samba, there's the connection of the culture, the religion, the history, everything. There's a very spiritual aspect to samba. And so the idea, I've lost myself in thought too. But I just wanted to say, like, the idea that we're gonna take care of each other and support each other is very important. How you don't grow a community by ignoring dancers. And I do think it is everyone's responsibility. It's one of the most inclusive dances. Another dance that I find is inclusive is also blues. And it's probably the only place where I've been where every lesson, every dance, they start off talking about behaviors. Little things like, it's okay to say no to a dance, but if you do and you make a little excuse about being tired, don't accept the next dance immediately. Like, wait at least a song or maybe even 2 before you get up, because we don't want people to feel like we just, you know, we're rejecting them and we don't care and these are lies. And it doesn't mean you have to dance with everyone, nor does it mean, because I get a lot of pushback when I say dance with more people, and they're like, well, what about the bad people in the community? I'm like, well, I'm advocating for good behavior. So I'm not talking about let's dance with predators. So let's stop gaslighting us when we're talking about those things. But part of having a community, I think, is having a code of ethics, because blues does also say, like, if someone's harassing you, if they're not doing XYZ, come talk to the organizer. What I would love to see in tango is teachers, but not just teachers, as Chrissy says, also advanced dancers really taking that lead. Could you at least spend one tanda a night dancing with someone you may have never danced before, dancing with someone who may be from out of town, dancing with a new person? I now remember what I wanted to say. So I've written about being excluded in tango, and one of the things that really drove me crazy is for this one milonga I went to completely by myself, just felt like dancing. Two ladies from Argentina came, and in samba, we teach, like, I respect the Brazilians of samba so much, so much. And it's not about idolization, just like respect that they have given us this wonderful culture to participate in. But long story short, these ladies showed up, they were older. One was wearing a sexier dress, one was wearing a simpler but both elegant dresses. And, you know, they were introduced, people came up speaking in Spanish, and then people didn't dance with them, particularly one woman. And so even though I had not danced at all that night either, I ran around begging people to dance with two ladies from Argentina that they couldn't have been happier to welcome into the space and then ignore. And the one woman in particular danced twice. I led her once, hoping people would see that she could dance. Nothing happened. And then another person who I personally asked to dance did. And it's like the idea in samba that I would reject a Brazilian person, whether they are good in samba or not, that is like, that would just never happen. Let me be very clear. That would never happen. And so I hate to, I'm not here to make people in tango feel bad, but I have to say, of all the dances, like, we don't have these conversations. This would not be a panel in samba. There are some other panels related to gender and how it plays out, or even colorism that subtly comes up. We would never have this conversation in samba. We do have this conversation in blues, but not to the extent of what we're talking about here. And so, and this is not to forgive other dances, these things do happen too, but like tango really has an extreme problem in this. I want to satisfy my need first and forget about everyone else, coupled with that idea that I have to drop my standards to be open to other people. That's just not true. That's not true.
Yeah. And you, I like what you're saying, because, you know, we're talking very conceptually about what people can do, which is like listening more and doing stuff. But you're offering, I mean, I think at some point we have to say, okay, well, what does that look like tactically? What do we need to do? Does that mean like one tanda per night is like dancing with somebody new, or dancing with somebody you haven't danced with in a long time? Like, what are those things that we can implement that's just going to promote and foster this, and it become the new norm? Because go ahead.
No, I was going to say, there are communities doing this. When I wrote that first article, and forgive me because I can't remember exactly where they are, but some of the teachers and organizers were kind and wrote to me and said, hey, we do this. We play little different games that causes random people to dance for just one tanda. That is huge, particularly, you know, thinking of Athia's story of like not dancing at all, which I've had that multiple nights, even in a row. So just at least having that one dance, but also for more people to realize, hey, I like and I connect with this person, it would be huge. And so really, I am arguing that teachers and organizers start every class with that conversation and say it twice in milonga, not just in the beginning where it's all beginners, but like once you have that critical mass of people in the intermission or whatever, you do an activity or you talk about that again, because that's how you change the culture of tango.
Can I say just an example of that I see and that has been really great is Maria Valentina in New York has a milonga that's been going on. It's fairly new, maybe a year or 2 years old. And something that she does is she'll have a tango merry-go-round kind of situation right around the announcement. So it's like critical mass. And it will be leaders and followers. She's careful about the language. She's been a great ally to the queer community in New York. And you get into one of the two circles, and then it's sort of like a class. It moves around, but every like 40 seconds. And it's just a way for one tanda. And it's just a way for everyone in the room to, you know, try out everyone else's embrace, try out, you know, dancing with them for 30 seconds. It's really not a big commitment. Right. And I think that changes the quality of that milonga hugely. And it's one tanda, it's one thing. And it's been really wonderful. The other thing I would say is hire Black teachers and hire Black performers and hire queer performers. And, you know, like you have these powers as organizers to have teachers and to have performers, as students also to take classes. And I feel like, you know, often those teachers will be instituting a different kind of ethic because of their own experience into their teaching, into their performing, as well as just being visible, you know?
Right, visibility is so important. I think Anthea was trying to say something. Sorry.
Go ahead, Anthea.
I wanted to say I really agree with more altruism in Tango, because I think it'll help the community to grow and just help people feel more included and have less people. I mean, it's a problem with people dropping out, especially guys who begin. So I think we need to nurture new beginners, but obviously, you know, we're not saying every milonga you must dance with one new person, because sometimes you've had a bad day at work and you're stressed and you just want to enjoy. And I think it's fine, but I just think we need to incorporate less consumerism and a bit more altruism. However, Nicole, I have to disagree with you on, I just think if you say no to someone, you shouldn't give an excuse. I think you should just be polite and say no, thank you. I don't think you need to say, you know, my leg hurts or I'm tired, because I don't think you should then have to be penalized for it and not dance the next tanda. I really don't believe in that. I think everyone should be free to refuse with politeness and kindness, but I don't believe in there's a name for it. What do they call it? When you have to sit out the next tanda because you said no.
It's like penalty box. You're in like the
penalty box. Yeah. I don't agree with that at all. I just think that's
just to clarify. I'm not saying make an excuse.
I just wanted to reiterate.
Oh, yeah,
I think we should not make excuses when we refuse dances.
No, that's a great point. And the example was not make an excuse, because we actually talked yesterday about people like, sorry at the end, we didn't get to dance. I was like, well, I tried to say you several times. My more point was that if you feel like you have to give that white lie,
no, I agree.
Don't follow that up with the behavior, because it happens. And so
no, I agree with that.
Don't then, you know, follow that up with the behavior of contradicting that. That makes a person feel worse. I remember once recently, this is even a silly little thing. I offered some wine to someone, a friend of the friend, never met her. She said, I'm just not thirsty. And then she immediately walked around the table and filled her glass with another glass of wine. I was just being generous. I didn't care whether she liked my wine or not, but like, you know, if you are going to make an excuse because you feel like you're a person who struggles with saying no, and I'm not going to judge you for that, then at least have the courtesy. Like, I'm assuming the intention behind that white lie is to not hurt someone's feelings. Yeah. So then follow it up. If you contradict that, then what you've really done is just made yourself comfortable. Right? Just yourself comfortable. You pretended it was about making another person comfortable, but you made yourself comfortable. And then you went around and showed that that was a lie, which becomes doubly hurtful to the person you lied to. So I think it's okay if you're comfortable making excuse, but if you're going to make that excuse, then at least don't make it an obvious lie, which is like a slap in the face. But yeah, it's totally, we should be able to say no. And that really is the point of some of those conversations around blues. They make it very clear, like, you can say no. And I just want to add one other quick point, because I am a little bit more extreme than this group. I am like a radical person, even in my politics. We should all be dancing with each other, not people that make you uncomfortable. But this idea that we don't dance with beginners at a certain level, like waiting for a beginner to get to this high level that they'll never get to. And it doesn't have to be, 30% of your night. It doesn't even have to be every night. It could be one tanda every other time you go dancing. But you really lose people. You lose people like myself, who danced for 10 years, who took private lessons, who was just about to start DJing, who went to Buenos Aires and bought 5 pairs of shoes. I think there are some shoes I have not worn yet. And I completely stopped. And part of that was because at that time I moved to Chicago, and this is not a diss against the Chicago scene. I just really was like, I don't have it in me to do this a third time in another community. So I'm out. Peace out, people. And, and part of the reason I dance in Chicago is just through dancing samba. I met Paula Borden, who is from Argentina. She's very lovely. She's my friend and I take lessons with her, but like, you're going to really lose people. And Christy made a great point about worrying about the people who are taking a break on COVID and not coming back. And I'll just say one last quick thing. In the professional space, in careers where women are underrepresented, there's a phenomena of when women are pregnant and go on maternity leave, they don't return to work. And people think it's because, oh, they want to be a stay-at-home mom. It's not that. During their break, which is an incredible amount of work caring for their child, they realize that the work environment was so toxic, they cannot bring themselves to go back. So they either stay at home or they change careers. And so in COVID, people are getting a break. And those of us who have had horrible experiences may realize I'm actually having more fun by myself at home, social distancing, than I am at a milonga. So maybe I don't need to come back. Like, how many people are we going to lose just from COVID alone, let alone the natural attrition of people who leave because they feel neglected? People think this community will always be there. Communities die, like, you know?
Yeah. We're at an almost like an hour and a half. And I want to ask like a couple of kind of maybe quick hitting questions, because from my perspective, as a white person, these are the things I'd like to know. One is about terminology. So, you know, we have, first of all, sometimes there's a discomfort where we're like, we talked about this yesterday, where like, if I'm trying to describe Nicole, not me per se, but like a person, they're like, that tall woman with the curly hair that is wearing the glasses. And there's a certain reticence some people have around saying the Black woman right there. And I guess we have to first feel comfortable, and then we have to know what is appropriate terminology, because we upgrade language all the time. And then sometimes the language that we're using doesn't feel right or doesn't feel authentic or it's not relevant anymore. So if somebody wants to kind of jump in and give examples of what feels good, it's kind of like,
I do not have a problem as long as people are interested and they ask questions and they don't say coloured.
Don't say coloured. I agree. I think first and foremost, like anything in inclusion, you should use the words that the person uses. Yeah. Right. That's like the easiest thing, right? If you've heard myself, if I referred to myself as African American, or if I referred to myself as Black, then that's fair. And I have an exact example. We don't have a lot of time for me to go into, but a literal example of that happening to me in Seattle, where people were trying to identify me, and they kept, and I was like, I don't, like, I'm the only, like, it would make this so, we're going in circles and circles, and you could just say that, because that's how I would describe myself, right? So I think first and foremost, as far as terminology, is you should use the words that the person uses. And like Anthea said, if you have a question, then ask the question. Just ask the question. Yeah. Like, and I
people are so uncomfortable though, but
they're so afraid. And yeah. I would like to add to that point, like this idea that, people are like, oh, well, I didn't want to say that because I don't like to, that I think it's an old thing that came out as, I don't see color. And I'm like, I don't not see it. I am a Black woman. So there's only one, like, like you said, the terminology may change throughout the decades, but like, I'm not going to stop being who I am because you've decided you're going to pretend that you can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I think it's just awareness. Just be aware, like, open your ears. It'll get in there by osmosis. I mean, I've had an older white lady say, she described me. She was telling a story she told about me, and she said, and then I said, the coloured girl, and I said, well, it's Black. And she's like, well, you're not really Black though. And I'm like, well, you're not really white though, but you're still white, so it's Black. And she was arguing with me about how to self-identify. She's like, so I don't feel right saying Black. And I'm like, well, I'm a Black person telling you it's okay, so you just need to listen. We're not coloured. No one got a felt tip pen and said, white people are the default. So you are a version of a white person, but colored in. That's what that means. We're not colored. We weren't colored. This is how we were made. Just in the end, I was just like, okay, I can't help you.
Amanda, go ahead. I think you wanted to say something.
I may have forgotten by now already. Okay, so yeah, don't be afraid to say Black or Black American or African American. Obviously, ask the person. Black is okay if I say that. And if you say it wrong and they give you a look, say, oh, I'm sorry. Accept it right away, move on. It's not that big of a deal. Always ask. Recognize, yeah, this idea of being Black, it's like, sometimes people get so literal with it. And now it becomes like, well, you're half and half. So you're not really Black though, are you? Or it's like, my mother is light-skinned, right? And we're African. She considers herself a Black woman because Black is representative of like a whole large group of people from many, many different countries. And so don't get so stuck on like the actual color. Well, you're brown or you're, it's like, oh God. Just...
Do you think it comes from the language? Because Black is bad, Black male, Black is night, hell, I don't know, whatever word you want. Yeah, I think maybe it comes from that, and people are equating Black person to like Black being bad.
I also think like that you like in the moment, right? You like Amanda said, you ask the person and you go with what they say. And if you say something wrong and they correct you, just accept that, make your apology and continue. Don't argue about it if they tell you they would prefer something else. But I think also, if I'm speaking to the people in the community that want to learn to do better, to think better, then also I feel like after that experience, that you have to think about that. Like, why is it so hard? What makes you so uncomfortable with identifying me in a way that I have already like literally said that I am, right? What makes it so difficult for you for that to come out of your mouth? What does that mean?
And especially for the LGBTQ movement, where I'm like, I don't even, like, things feel like they're changing at an even faster pace, or terminology is getting used. And I'm like, I get overwhelmed. I feel a sense of overwhelm. I'm like around pronouns, around appropriateness, making assumptions. And it's just like, oh, wow, I need a schooling, and I would rather stay silent sometimes than be wrong. But I would love Luna to speak to that.
I think you're right that it is changing really quickly. And those of us in the community are also adjusting constantly, because we recognize that, when it comes to gender, for example, we are actually changing norms. And language changes with that. And it's important to precisely have the attitude that everyone's been talking about, which is to listen and to be willing to be corrected and to be willing to reflect on what the change means. Like why someone's asking that of you, why someone's asking you to, state pronouns or ask pronouns or change pronouns, right? But I also think that there's like, often people want a quick fix, right? Like a quick how to not be racist, how to not be homophobic fix. And that's a great place to start, but it's not, I think that once you actually are more in the habit of listening to certain communities and interacting with certain communities, there's less fear around getting it wrong, because first of all, you have this attitude of I can be corrected. And second of all, it's not like some unknown scary space, right? So if you're having to ask this question, definitely ask it, but then go back and think like, how often do I look at media that involves people who don't look like me, or who have, are in different communities than me? How often do I listen to those voices or read a book, or, who are my friends, right? It definitely goes deeper than a word, I would say.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and like, it feels like people have two different gloves that they wear. It's either very, very cautious and super scared, or like overly exotifying your ethnicity at the same time. And it's so difficult. Like there's just no middle ground,
We talked about this yesterday, right? Where
about I don't
exoticizing instead of
I love that you appreciate that my skin is beautiful and that my skin is soft and that my hair is so interesting. I think there's a certain level where the appreciation it's appreciated, it's felt, and I love it, and but then there's sometimes in some cases where it goes just a little bit above, and it seems like it's almost too much. And it's this feeling that you get. And just be mindful a little bit if you're like, oh my God, your skin is like, okay, all right, let's
Yeah.
Well, it goes from like not seeing somebody to totally objectifying them, or like and sexualizing your ethnicity, right?
Or objectifying, not even necessarily sexual, but like as a specialty item that has appeared for my enjoyment.
And then I feel bad for feeling a little bit off about it, because I'm like, well, they're being nice, right? They're saying nice things to me, but something in my body still feels like,
it's like cringe.
Yes. And I don't know how to talk about this with my friends.
I think it's a boundary, and I think as Black women, it's because we're often touched, especially for our hair. Like when there's probably a shift that might be confusing to the white public when every Black person had straight hair and suddenly everyone has hair like ours, because we all stopped using chemicals and whatnot to straighten our hair. And so, yes, there's been a lot of support around that, but there's also been a lot of things like touching. And I mean, I once had a woman in the London subway, which has those crazy escalators, not even touch me. She grabbed me in the back of my head. And then I turned around and it was like, ah. And it was one of those parallel escalators. Her friends were on the parallel track going down. So this was like premeditated. And when I stared at her, I was so shocked I couldn't even say anything. Like she just ran down to be at the same level as her friends. Like there are just so many ways we're violated. But I also want to just jump back to the question about how to address people. Agreed. Listen to what they're saying, but it's okay to be wrong too. Just own it and say, I'm sorry, and I didn't understand, or I didn't know, and I'm going to make a mental note for before. I can't tell you how many times, and in my experience, it's largely been white men that I've had this challenge with, who have started off telling me, you are Black or you are African American. Like, we didn't discuss it. I didn't say one or the other. They just was like, you are this. And then there was an argument over how I should identify. And I haven't even necessarily even clarified how I identify. There's an assumption that I identify one way, and that's wrong. And here's the correction for you. Someone from the Tango community we were talking, and he kept inserting the word Negro. He's an older guy. And I was like, what? At first I thought he said that because we were talking about the past, and I let it go a little bit, and I was like, what is your problem? He's like, oh, you're right, my children are always like, that's racist. And I said, so you've been told this. And I'm telling you now as a Black person, this is not good. So I think, and sorry, I'm getting long-winded, but like, just here's what I always say. When you teach your children at school to not call Billy this name because it's wrong and it makes him feel bad and like you get that concept, and then you become adults, and then you think that you, as a majority person, a person of privilege, get to define how other people identify, and you completely forget and throw out everything that you tell your children about how to be a respectful person, right? And so just think about it from that lens. How can we be respectful? And part of that is acknowledging people in the way they want to be acknowledged.
Really quick, can I say something?
Okay. Yeah. And then I went
really quick things, which ties into pretty much what everybody said. So 3 years ago, I was in Buenos Aires just for a little quick trip, 3 months, and I kind of met one of my favorite tango dancer partner people, and he also dances salsa, so it was amazing. I was like, who are you, where have you been? And then he was like, oh, do you want to come to this salsa thing on whenever day? And I was like, yeah, cool. And then he said, this is all about exoticism, and then he said, I mean, I would feel so proud walking in with, I think he said, brown queen on my arm, and I was just like, okay, I'm not going with you now, I'm not going. I literally was like, no. I mean, why? He just ruined my dream. I was like, I can't go there with you now, because you just spoiled everything. And then the other example is outside of tango, which ties into my point about how Black women are seen in society, and why maybe we get overlooked in the milonga because we're not sophisticated, elegant, graceful, blah blah. So I used to have this friend, and she has a husband, and we were in a bar, we were talking, and for some reason he started asking he said something, and then he's like, so you know how you're dual heritage or mixed race? And I was like, no, I'm not. And he's like, yeah, you are. And I was like, well, my mom, like your mom, Amanda, she's very pale. She's from Jamaica. Her skin is almost white, but she's a black woman. But obviously in her family, I think her granddad was from Scotland or something like that. My great granddad. But my dad is from Africa. And I was like, so no, I'm not of mixed race, but my mom is very pale and she has European blood in her ancestry. So, but I'm black, so both my parents are black. And he's like, no, you must be mixed race, Anthea, because you're not aggressive. So basically, he's like, I can't be fully black because there'll be some white in my family which has diluted the African aggression. And that is what I mean when I say people look at you as a black woman and they have these biases in their mind about how you can be, how your body can be, how your movements can be, because they have a base idea of who you are.
Yeah.
I was once asked which one of your parents are white. So I think we've all experienced this in some way. I'm like, neither.
Have you seen my face? My face never left Africa. Look at my nose.
We can still take on this, but I want to acknowledge that Luna actually has to run, and I want to give her a moment before she has to jump off to just, if you're offering anything right now, if there's anything that you'd like to promote, I would love to give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just been so wonderful to talk with all of you. I'm really so glad this happened. I have a work call. Sorry. Didn't expect this to go quite as long as it did, but there's so much to talk about. I think I've said a lot of things that I want to get across. Personally, I speak for myself and my own politics, but I'm also paying attention to Black Lives Matter in the US right now. Defund the police is one of their major demands. Donate if you can. I feel it as urgent, and I feel like it is about the world that I want to see. So that's where some of my resources are going right now. And yeah, I think it's just, there's so much work to do, and it's for everyone's good that we're doing it. It's really about making new communities and new spaces that are helpful and loving and wonderful for all of us. So thank you all for sharing this conversation with me, and thanks for having me, Christina.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Luna.
Thanks for joining. Yeah.
Hi, Luna.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
So ladies, I love to talk to you more, but I feel like this is
to shut up.
No, it's there's so many nuances to this story that I feel I wish we could extrapolate and expand upon. But maybe we can save that for a round 2 or a conversation that happens in another way. This is just a touching point for people to understand. And I really think that you guys have proven examples of experiences that have happened, of the way people either have treated you or didn't treat you. And they're really profound. And I really understand now as a white woman and just as a human in general, of where I wasn't able to see certain things. Now that I can, I have a clarity that I didn't have before. And I have also an encouragement from you guys to sort of, I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to be brave enough to like ask a question that makes me either feel dumb or inconsiderate, but I'm willing to ask it because I feel like that's better than the alternative right now, right? That you're more likely going to be met with someone that's willing to work with you, willing to help educate you, than someone who's just going to be mean or just rude or treating you poorly back. I've just found that more likely than not, you'll be met with someone that wants to teach and educate. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for putting this together. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Amanda. Yeah, I just say thanks for getting us together. And I think we all, we can all recognize we all have privilege. I've got straight privilege, able-bodied privilege, I'm not blind privilege, I'm not deaf privilege. We've all got privilege. And so, you know, and I have gay friends, I have trans friends, I have deaf friends, you know, and I ask questions. And if someone's your friend, you should be asking the questions and you should be listening to what they say. And I'm still learning about, you know, things like deaf culture and sort of gender culture and all the new terms. And I Google them all the time because I'm like, oh gosh, I don't remember what that particular term means. Like, Google is there. There is no excuse for willful ignorance. Maybe in the 90s where you had to go to the library and get a book. But, you know, really, seriously, now you can find this stuff. You know, so people don't even have to ask me, what should I do? Because it's there. I mean, ask me, it's fine. But the information is all out there at your disposal. So, yeah, but yeah, thanks so much for this, Christina. Amazing.
As my computer's dying. Sorry, I'm rushing to plug it in. Yeah, no, that was something that I wanted to say was reach out. As far as like what I would say to do, nothing that it doesn't even have to be anything big. Do what Christina has done. She has put herself out there. She has asked us these questions. She's listened to us. She's talked to us. Reach out to people that you know, that you've seen in the Milonga. Ask them first if you're gonna ask, and if they have time to talk, then just bombard all the Black people that you know. But take the time to actually listen to people. Take the time to hear other people's experiences. So that, and the next time you're in a Milonga or next time you're interacting, use all of the skills that you've learned from Tango of reading body language and try to like be more, open your eyes a little bit more, be more woke in your set, you know, in your social circles, and call out your friends if you hear something. You don't have to be disrespectful, but I think we've been silent for too long. We've been okay with just saying, well, it is a bad situation, but you know what to do. If you find some of your friends are commenting or saying something on Facebook and it doesn't feel right, you can just send them a private message, even if you don't want to say something public. But people, we just need to be more aware. That's the first issue, is just being more aware of what our biases are.
Yeah. Amanda, do you have anything that you're promoting or?
I think she's plugging in.
All right.
Maybe you can jump back to her.
Yeah. Sorry, Amanda, I was going to say, did you have anything that you're promoting, any classes or any events or any place that you're?
Tango Mercurio, no. No, I would say, you know, earlier this morning, I started to look at more Black roots in Tango, and I think someone had even commented on the live video. I noticed some stuff from, I believe it's Pierre, I forget his last name.
Pierre Baston.
Yeah, he's from Philly. I'm starting to read some more of that. Just educate yourself. I mean, even as the other day I found out that Horacio Salgan is like Afro-Argentinian, and I'm like, what? I play his music all the time to start every single milonga. I didn't even know this. Like, the same depth that you reach into understanding the music and the orchestras, also take that extra step, you know. Fundraisers. I mean, do what you feel is comfortable, what moves you. I don't want to force or make people necessarily have to feel like, okay, well, if I don't do this, I'm a bad person. But I mean, you guys are getting all sorts of information in your Facebook feeds, your social media feeds. Pay attention. If you see something where, you know, clearly there are several different fundraisers for bailing out people who are protesting and are unjustly being imprisoned, for Tango instructors, just, I don't know, just, we're so socially connected, but yet not at the same time. We're sort of pretending to be socially connected. And we always, there's this thing in Tango where we always talk about how, oh my God, I wish I had more time to talk to you. I wish I had more time to hang out, you know, but we never make the time. We just say, okay, well, hopefully next time we'll get to hang out more and talk more, right? But like, now is the time to plan and to engage with people, not just Black people, people who you know that are queer or within the queer community, people that you know, that people who are not like you, and just find out what their experiences have been like.
Thank you, Amanda.
Who's gonna get bombarded by messages?
Nicole, do you want to sort of tell people what?
A couple of quick things, and I'll try to be fast. So some people have known I write about Tango and inclusion. One thing I want to, and recently I wrote about my experience as a Black person, and it was sort of a message to my white friends in America. I'm not going to get into this story about that being taken down in a Tango post, but I write about that later on my page. tonight or tomorrow if you want to look. But one thing that struck me is when I wrote about my personal experience of racism, maybe it's because of the moment we're in right now, people were, they really resonated with that. They commented, they shared that post. I think that post was shared over 58 times. But when I've written over the past year and even more recently about inclusion in Tango, I get a lot of hearts and thumbs up and no shares. So if you think this is valuable to talk about inclusion, share that. But even better than sharing my post, because it's not just about being self-serving, talk about it yourselves, write about it yourselves. It's not enough. Facebook culture, like clicks and likes, are cheap. We need action. We need people to speak. So if you think it's good enough to heart, continue that conversation, or share it and continue that conversation. Last thing I want to quickly talk about, I'm raising money for Brazilian children who have been impacted by COVID. Carnival is a year-round thing that the samba schools of Brazil employ over 300 people, and they work on this one event 11 months of the year. So like the top 12 samba schools in Brazil each employ 300 people. And they don't just have their adult school, they have the school for the children. And these children get their food, clothing, and security from those groups. So none of those folks are working. Children are literally, food insecure right now. So I'm working with Jill Costa, my teacher, and Patrick Carvalho to raise money. So find my page if you would like to donate money. $1 is 5 reais. It really can go a long way to providing food and clothing and hygiene products to people who often don't even have proper sanitation or running water, who are really going to die from COVID or be impacted. So if you would like to donate to the children of Brazil who are connected with the Samba community, please reach out to me and I can tell you how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Nicole. Jamila, do you have any parting thoughts or things that you got going on that you'd like to share?
Just some quick parting thoughts. Like I think everybody had said the importance, and I think Luna had mentioned earlier, like we are in a really like important moment, I think, in the world right now where awareness is about these issues, about the Black Lives Matter issues, about police brutality in the United States and other places. As we know, it happens to Black and brown bodies. That the awareness is forefront in people's mind. And I think, like Luna had mentioned, like it's great to start with this awareness, but we are really, I feel like now in a time of action, and that action I can't decide for other people, but that action has to come from within, and every step is a step in the right direction. So I know I have a lot of people saying they don't know what to do or how to do it or how to make an impact. And, not everybody needs to be on the front lines protesting, but everybody needs to do something, right? It's not a time, like Amanda said, to be like, oh, that is too bad, and then to go on about your life. I think now is the time to say that is too bad, and I would like to do something, right? And to work to define that for yourself. I don't have any fundraisers, but I think, like Amanda said, there's a lot of information online about how you can help the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter movement. That was like a tongue twister. And that information is readily available. Like Anthea said, there's information out there you can Google. But there are also bigger things. And as a Tango community, I mean, I just want to again bring the awareness to Tango dancers around the world, especially in Argentina, that are suffering from our lack or from the COVID pandemic, and that we're not able to dance, and when Buenos Aires they're suffering too. So I mean, I think it's a time of action altogether, and I think that's my final word. Like, it's enough. It's good that we're talking about it. It's good that you're thinking about it, but I think in a lot of ways we're asking you to act.
Thank you. I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, exactly. Anthea, any last parting thoughts?
Amanda just wanted to say something quickly.
Oh, okay, sure.
I know we focus a lot on the US and Argentina, but think about how many people have taken up protesting around the world. how many people have been moved by this incident, and realize that when you bring it to the perspective of Tango, these issues are very prevalent outside of the US as well. Just because they're less mixed of people doesn't mean that dark skin or Black people within your respective countries and your respective milongas don't also go through the same thing. So just be mindful of that. This is not something that's unique to the US, although the US does have a lot of extra history there. But this is, no matter, for some strange reason, no matter where you are in this world, just being dark for some reason is always an issue. You're always less than in someone's eyes. So this is not something that's unique to the US.
Yeah, I think everyone said everything. I just wanted to say, you know, just we all made all these promises to ourselves at the beginning of lockdown, and now that we're coming out of lockdown, we're all forgetting these promises. You know, people are going to the park and leaving their stuff in the park. There's litter everywhere. And I just think, you know, all those promises you made about, oh, if only I could, I don't know, go to a milonga or go and see my family, I'd hug them so tight and I'd be this and I'd be that. And I think, you know, keep all that in mind when, you know, things go back to a semblance of normality. Don't just throw all those promises out of the window about being a more generous person or a more altruistic person or a more aware person, maybe, you know, especially in the times that we're in right now. Just kind of, we've all got time to think about how we want to better ourselves. This is the perfect time to think about that, and so use it well. But I think Nicole wanted to say something.
Yeah,
Okay, yep.
Literally one sentence. I forgot to mention there is a new Tango group on Facebook called Tango Dancers for Social Justice. So if you want to think about ways that we can work on inclusivity, it's both for thinking about inclusion in Tango as well as thinking about activism outside in the real world. So please join Tango Dancers for Social Justice.
Awesome.
Thank you to everyone
Thank
who, I know we've talked a lot about people who need to do better, but there are already people who have been doing a very good job of supporting people, us, Black people, queer people, anybody who's other than, a lot of my very good friends who have made me feel what I should have felt from the beginning, despite, you know, how social media makes you feel. And it's unfortunate that I had to get that from the outside, not from the inside, but there have been a lot of people in my personal life in the Tango community that have really helped me out as well. So this isn't just about, you know, all the people who need to improve, but thank you to all of the people who have been already doing a very good job in being very supportive this entire time.
Sure.
Thank you so much, ladies. I wanted to say one quick thing that also I had an intention of transcribing this for anyone that was hard of hearing. It didn't work out for this particular one, but I have, it's kind of like a call to action if anyone wants to sort of donate that time to work on this particular Facebook Live and after it gets downloaded. I'd really love that, because that means it's available for people that you know, have disabilities, and also it's able to be translated easier if we can do that. So that means more people with more in different languages can have this available to them. And I just wanted to say thank you guys one more time, Anthea, you know, Jamila, Nicole, Amanda, and Luna, for participating. I'm so grateful that you did, and I want to hopefully have another conversation in the future where we can talk about this in a way that's like we've seen so much significant change, and we can celebrate that. So thank you so much. Thank you, Facebook people. I'm really sorry about all the glitches. I'll figure it out at some point, or Facebook will figure it out at some point. But just know that afterwards you'll be able to see this, and I'll work on that. Thank you guys. If you guys want to just stay on, I'll just leave the live stream. So thank you so much, Facebook community. And
thank you, Christy.
Thanks, Facebook people. Thanks for
Facebook.
listening. Stay with us.
Bye-bye.
All the people on the comments who have been like posting things as we've been talking.
yeah,
Great, posting links.
Yeah, thanks.
see everybody.